Hello, this video is an OT perspective on letter formation. Sometimes with writing, we tend to focus too much maybe on the more obvious piece of maybe what grip looks like, physically holding a pencil, being able to make the coordinated finger movements. But there's actually a lot more to writing, including visual perception, so understanding what we see, and then also motor planning, being able to conceptualize and move through all the different strokes that are in letter formation. And really some of these letters are 2 to 4 step directions with all the different strokes to them. So can be some complexity to this. To address it, I try to use multisensory letter formation learning strategies. So it can be summarized really in touch it, trace it, try it is sort of my framework. That first phase, touch it, is really getting hands-on with it. So it can be building the letter, it can be adding some extra texture for touch, so there's less of only seeing it, we can also feel it. And then auditory, so again, saying the letter formation as we go, adding all the supports we can in that way to help our students be successful. The next step of it, tracing, is moving on to using a writing utensil. It can be on a marker board, chalkboard, paper, whatever you have, but kind of making that transfer to more formal writing, but still in a way that's sort of supervised, and you can scaffold it by having them trace over what you do, and also you modeling it first so they can watch how you do it. We want to end with hopefully trying it out, right? So it's important to do this for a few reasons. It helps us assess, so we know if students are getting closer to doing it on their own, if they understood it. And also, it really prompts our students to access the part of their brains that are into that motor memory, motor planning, because if we always scaffold it and make it traceable or hand over hand, then they're not actively using that themselves and putting it to memory more strongly. So we want to make sure they get their own experience with that, can make a few mistakes with it, and do all three of those things. So we want to definitely set them up for success, but also have them try it as well. So let's go over a few different ways we can do the touch it stage. No matter what materials you have at home, if you're able just to take a sheet of paper and write the letter you want to work on, you have a lot of options. So I have my A here. I can take some everyday objects, so I could grab some Legos. And I can use these Legos and set them around my A to build it. Make sure that we're encouraging kids and supervising to still use the correct pattern. So I'm going to start with my hook around, then I'll build my whole hook around, then little line down. Because early on we want to kind of set them up for the pattern we want them to use. Another way we can do this is Play-Doh. So roll out some Play-Doh in a log, which is also great hand skill. I just kind of pre-did this so that it could speed this along. Go ahead and put that over your letter. And then if you have Play-Doh over your letter, I just have the hook around part right now, you can add beads. So you can help them get this structured correctly. And then just take some beads. Good fine motor again of pushing the beads in, following the letter formation pattern you're doing. It's a way to build it. Really think about the letter before we dive into writing. Another way could be grabbing out some Q-tips. And if you have some paint, Q-tips are great fine motor since they're nice and thin, they're short, and it's a little bit more fun than paper pencil, adds some novelty, and we can dot, making some pretty dots with paint all around our letter. We can also grab out, if you have some rice, or you can use cornmeal, sprinkles, sugar, whatever you have, put a little bit of a textured sort of a material you can use on a plate or tray, smooth it out, and then you can trace your letters right into there. So it's similar to that trace it phase, but as a lot of that texture in there yet. You can also, as you can see, my letter is going to be hard to see under there. You can also tape a piece of paper before you pour in the rice or whatever you're using, with a letter on it already so they can kind of find the letter underneath the trace. Sometimes that's helpful. And then last, for an example for Build It, kind of a favorite of mine, you can use glue to go over the letter, and then take some tissue paper. So crumble up some old tissue paper or colored paper you have, rip it up, crumble it nice and small. Great fine motor and coordination, and then also some sensory touching the glue, and put it all around your template. When it dries, what you'll have is a letter that you can go back to and trace over with your fingertip when you need a reminder of that formation. This nice salient way to, feel the letters, make that. So those are examples of the Build It again. Moving on to the Trace It, it is okay to trace large at first. So the letter you make for your child to trace may be large, and that's okay. Because with those full arm movements, we certainly don't want them for accuracy long term, but in the early stages, they're great for learning because more muscles involved, kind of more motor memory of the movement. So that's why it also can be helpful to write air letters sometimes, right? So with that stage, once you finish the tracing, supervising to make sure we're using the right patterns, go on to try it. You don't need to have fancy paper. You can, if you don't have penmanship paper on hand, you can make it yourself, adding some just squares on a sheet of paper. And what you can have on this is adding a dot if you need to let children know where to start, or an arrow as a cue. But make sure that they're still trying, with that cue is fine, but still trying the overall letter. One thing, this does mirror image with the camera. I'm hoping this one comes out correct. If it's backwards, I'm sorry. That's just the camera with the mirror image. All right. Last, I wanted to kind of remind, if you haven't gotten a sheet that goes over some efficient letter formation patterns, let me know and I can help you with that. Also, letters that group together well. So A is similar to C. It has a hook around. There's some letters that just naturally group together well. That can be helpful as you go forward learning. Also, if you have a chalkboard, I can show you something that Handwriting Without Tears does. Also with Handwriting Without Tears, I can show you. We were using squares earlier. Let's see, right here. Squares earlier, and I had written on the back of one of these papers, but you can see really they use this just for spatial, so it's okay to have something simple like that for our writing. So going with the chalkboard method, what you can do is write your letter out first on the chalkboard, and then your child will trace it next. So you have your A, I have it here. Then I will want them to trace. So first I have it there, a small piece of chalk for good fine motor, trace. Writing with chalk, it kind of gives that bumpy feedback, so some extra sensory input as you're learning. And it also slows you down, so you're not whipping through it too quickly. So it makes you really think about what you're doing with it. Next, we can take our fingertip and trace over it. So now I have kind of a smudgy A here. And then a third way we're going to go over it, so we're going to have a lot of options here and practice as we're going. Take a little bit of water on a paper towel. And we write over it with that wet piece. Again, following an efficient letter formation pattern as we go. So we don't want to see a scribbling over it, still follow a pattern. And so you can still sort of see. When this dries, you'll have your blank chalkboard again, and you can have them try it on their own. So I can dry it off if it's not all the way. And then it's their chance to do it by themselves after getting 3 sort of structured attempts to learn that letter. So I hope that's helpful as you go forward with letter formation. Let me know if you have any questions.